I never thought watching my brother lie unconscious in a hospital bed would be the moment I finally saw my family clearly. Jake's chest rose and fell mechanically while machines beeped around us, but all I could hear were the venomous words my mother had just screamed at me in front of the entire emergency room staff. "You ruined our lives! Get out!" She had shrieked, her hand still stinging from where she'd slapped me moments before. My father stood behind her. Nodding grimly, my sister Emma crossed her arms with satisfaction, and my Aunt Carol pointed an accusing finger at my face. They all blamed me for Jake's overdose because I had refused to give them money for his so-called rehab last month. The fluorescent hospital lights buzzed overhead as I drove home through empty suburban streets, my cheeks still burning from my mother's slap. The radio played softly, but my mind was spinning through decades of memories I had pushed down for years. This wasn't the first time my family had made me their villain. It was just the latest chapter in a story that started when I was barely old enough to understand what blame meant. I remembered being 8 years old, standing in my grandmother's pristine living room while she cried over her shattered antique china set. Jake had been throwing a baseball in the house, despite being told not to, and when it crashed into the display cabinet, somehow I was the one who got dragged into the kitchen for punishment. "You should have been watching him better," my mother had said, her voice cold as winter. "You're the older sister. This is your responsibility." Even at 8, I knew it wasn't fair, but I accepted the spanking and grounding because that's what older sisters did right. When I was 14 and Jake was 10, he decided to experiment with our father's cigarettes behind the garage. The scorch marks on the wooden siding could have burned down our entire house. But when the fire department left and the insurance adjuster finished taking pictures, guess who got blamed for not preventing it? Kyle should have known what he was up to. My father announced at dinner that night, "She spends too much time with her nose in books instead of paying attention to her family responsibilities." I lost my library privileges for 3 months and had to do extra chores to pay for the siding repair, while Jake got a gentle talking to about fire safety. The pattern became so normal, I stopped questioning it. When Emma got pregnant at 16 during her junior year of high school, somehow that became my fault too. I was only 14, then honor roll student, never missed curfew, never caused any trouble. But according to my parents, I had failed as a role model. If you had been a better example for your sister, instead of being so focused on grades and college applications, maybe she would have made better choices. My mother explained while driving Emma to her first prenatal appointment. I spent the rest of high school feeling guilty for Emma's pregnancy, wondering how my academic success had somehow corrupted my sister's judgment. College should have been my escape, but even 200 miles away, I couldn't outrun their blame. When my father lost his job after his gambling addiction was discovered at work, somehow my tuition payments became the source of our family's financial strain. Never mind that I had earned a partial scholarship and worked 2 part-time jobs to minimize their burden. Maybe if we weren't paying for Kyle's expensive education, we could have afforded to get your father the help he needs, my mother told Emma during one of their phone calls, not knowing I was listening from my dorm room phone extension. After graduation, I landed a good job as a marketing coordinator at a pharmaceutical company in Phoenix. Finally, I thought I could build my own life and contribute to the family without being their constant scapegoat. For 6 years, I sent money home monthly, paid for Jake's car repairs, covered Emma's medical bills when her son needed surgery, and helped with mortgage payments when my parents fell behind. I thought supporting them financially would earn me some respect and gratitude. Instead, it made the blame worse. Every dollar I sent was somehow insufficient, and every family crisis became evidence of my selfishness. When Jake dropped out of community college for the 3rd time, it was because I wasn't encouraging enough during our phone calls. When Emma's marriage fell apart, it was because I didn't visit often enough to provide emotional support. When my parents' roof started leaking, it was because I should have noticed during my last visit and offered to pay for repairs sooner. Now, at 28 years old, sitting in my small apartment surrounded by the life I had built despite their constant criticism, I finally understood what had taken me so long to see. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was their scapegoat, their ATM, and their emotional punching bag all rolled into one convenient package. Jake's overdose was just the latest crisis they could pin on me, and they didn't even hesitate before pointing their fingers in my direction. The realization hit me like a physical weight in my chest. I had spent 20 years trying to earn love from people who had decided long ago that I was the source of all their problems. No amount of money support or sacrifice would ever be enough, because they needed me to be the villain in their story. It gave them someone to blame instead of taking responsibility for their own choices and failures. My phone buzzed with another text from Emma. Jake could have died because of your selfishness. How do you live with yourself? I stared at the message for a long time, then turned off my phone and went to bed. For the first time in my adult life, I fell asleep without worrying about what crisis my family would blame me for next. The next morning started like any other Tuesday. I made coffee-checked emails and prepared for another day at the office. But at exactly 9:15 a.m., my phone rang with a call that would change everything. The voice on the other end was crisp and professional, belonging to someone from the fraud department at my bank. Miss Thompson, we're calling about some unusual activity on your accounts. We've detected several large purchases that don't match your normal spending patterns. Can you verify some recent transactions for us? My stomach dropped as she rattled off a list of charges I had never made. $700 at a sporting goods store, $400 at an electronics retailer, $600 for something called Premium Wellness Solutions, which sounded like a fancy name for nothing legitimate. The charges went back 3 weeks and totaled over $4,000 across multiple credit cards I barely used. I didn't make any of these purchases. I told her, my voice steady, despite the panic building in my chest. This has to be fraud. We'll start the dispute process immediately, she assured me. But Miss Thompson, there's something else. These charges were made using not just your credit cards, but also with your social security number to open new accounts. Someone has been using your identity quite extensively. After hanging up, I spent 2 hours on the phone with various credit agencies and discovered the full scope of the damage. Jake hadn't just stolen my credit cards during his last visit to my apartment. He had used my personal information to open store credit accounts, apply for cash advance loans, and even attempt to get a car loan. The total debt in my name was approaching $15,000, and it had been accumulating for over a month. I drove straight to my parents' house, documents in hand, and fury building with every mile. I found them in their usual spots: my mother watching her afternoon talk shows while folding laundry, my father reading the newspaper at the kitchen table. They looked up with identical expressions of annoyance when I walked through the front door. "Kyle," my mother said without getting up from the couch, "I'm surprised you have the nerve to show your face here after what happened at the hospital yesterday." "We need to talk about Jake's identity theft," I said, spreading the credit reports across their coffee table. "He's been using my social security number to rack up debt for weeks. This is serious fraud that could destroy my credit permanently." The silence that followed was deafening. My parents exchanged a look that told me everything I needed to know before either of them said a word. They knew. They had known, and they hadn't told me. "Now, Kyle," my father said, slowly setting down his newspaper, "before you go making accusations, you need to understand that Jake has been struggling. He needed help, and sometimes family has to make sacrifices for family." "Sacrifices," I repeated, my voice rising. "He committed identity theft. This is a felony. He could go to prison, and my credit could be ruined for years." "Don't be so dramatic," my mother snapped, finally standing up. "It's not like he took money directly from your accounts. These are just credit cards and loans. You make good money, you can pay them off." "That's not the point," I said, feeling like I was talking to aliens. "He stole my identity. He forged my signature. This is a crime. He's your brother, my father said firmly. Family doesn't press charges against family. We'll work something out to pay it back gradually. How long have you known about this? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Another exchanged glance. About 3 weeks, my mother admitted. Emma helped him with some of the paperwork because his handwriting is so messy. But Kyle, you have to understand, he was desperate. He owes some dangerous people money for his drugs, and he was scared. The room started spinning. Not only had Jake stolen my identity, but Emma had actively helped him forge my signature. My own sister had participated in destroying my financial future, and my parents had watched it happen for 3 weeks without saying a word to me. They had let me worry about Jake's well-being, send money for his supposed rehab, and support the family financially, while they all conspired to steal from me. You all knew, I said quietly. You knew he was committing fraud in my name, and you didn't tell me because you thought I would press charges against him. Well, wouldn't you, my mother demanded. You've never shown much family loyalty when it comes to making hard decisions. You always choose yourself over the rest of us. This isn't about family loyalty, I said, my voice getting stronger. This is about crime. Jake committed identity theft. Emma helped him forge documents, and you both covered it up. You're all accessories to felony fraud. Now you're just being hysterical, my father said dismissively. No one's going to prison over some credit card debt. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. I looked at these people who had raised me, who were supposed to protect and support me, and realized they viewed me as nothing more than a resource to be exploited. They weren't just scapegoating me anymore. They were actively destroying my life while expecting me to be grateful for the privilege of being victimized by my own family. I'm going to the police, I said, gathering up my documents. If you do that, you'll tear this family apart, my mother warned. Jake could go to prison. Emma could be charged as an accomplice. Is that really what you want? I stopped at the front door and turned back to look at them one more time. You already tore this family apart. You just did it quietly while making me think I was the problem. As I drove away from their house, I realized this was the final straw I had been unconsciously waiting for my entire life. The emotional abuse, the financial manipulation, and the constant scapegoating had been building toward this moment where they crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. They had committed actual crimes against me while expecting me to take responsibility for their consequences. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't going to protect them from the results of their own choices. I spent the next morning at the police station filing reports and learning about the legal process for identity theft cases. Officer Maria Rodriguez walked me through the steps, her expression growing more serious as she reviewed the documentation I had brought. This is pretty extensive fraud, she said, flipping through pages of credit applications with forged signatures. Your brother didn't just steal your credit cards. He's been systematically using your identity for weeks. The fact that other family members knew about it and helped makes this a conspiracy case. What happens next? I asked, feeling both relieved and terrified to be taking official action. We'll open an investigation, contacted the creditors, and interview the involved parties. Given that you have witnesses who can testify that your family admitted to knowing about the fraud, this should be a straightforward case. The challenge will be getting your credit restored and the fraudulent debts removed. I left the police station feeling like I had taken the first real step toward protecting myself, but that feeling disappeared when I got home and found 3 voicemails from my boyfriend Marcus. His voice sounded confused and concerned in a way that immediately put me on edge. Hey Kyle, call me back when you get this. Your mom called me this morning and said some things that have me worried about you. I think we need to talk. My hands were shaking as I dialed his number. Marcus and I had been dating for 8 months, and he was the first person I had ever dated who seemed to genuinely care about my well-being without trying to fix or change me. The thought of my family poisoning that relationship made me feel sick. Kyle, Marcus answered on the first ring. Thank God. I've been worried about you all day. What did my mother tell you? I asked, cutting straight to the point. She called this morning crying, saying you had some kind of mental breakdown yesterday at the hospital. She said you were making up stories about Jake and the family, and that you might be having some kind of psychotic episode. She wanted me to watch for signs that you might hurt yourself or someone else. The manipulation was so calculated and vicious that I actually laughed, which probably didn't help convince Marcus that I was mentally stable. What else did she say? She said your family is really worried about you and that you've been acting paranoid and delusional lately. She mentioned that you accused Jake of stealing your identity, which she said was impossible because he's been in the hospital. She wanted to know if you had been acting strange or aggressive with me. My Marcus, I said carefully, Jake overdosed 3 days ago and was released from the hospital the same day. He's not been hospitalized this whole time, and I have police reports documenting the identity theft. My mother is lying to you. The silence stretched out long enough that I worried the call had dropped. Finally, Marcus spoke and his voice sounded different. Kyle, why would your mother lie about something like that? I mean, I know families can be complicated, but accusing your own son of identity theft seems pretty extreme. Because she's been covering up his crime for weeks, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Marcus, my entire family has been lying about this. They knew Jake was using my social security number to open fraudulent accounts, and they didn't tell me because they knew I would press charges. But your mom seemed genuinely worried about your mental state, Marcus said slowly. She said your family is scared that you might be having some kind of breakdown and that you're blaming them for things they didn't do. I felt something cold settle in my stomach as I realized what was happening. My family hadn't just covered up Jake's crimes. They were actively trying to discredit me by making everyone in my life believe I was mentally unstable. They were probably calling everyone I cared about with the same story, planting seeds of doubt about my credibility and mental health. Marcus, I need you to listen to me very carefully, I said. I'm going to text you photos of the police reports, the credit applications with forged signatures, and the banking records. I need you to look at the evidence before you decide whether I'm having a mental breakdown or if my family is lying to cover up felony fraud. After I sent the documents, Marcus called back within 20 minutes. His voice sounded stunned. Kyle, this is real. These are actual police reports. Your brother really did steal your identity. Now, do you understand why my mother would call you with lies about my mental health? I asked. She's trying to discredit me before the truth comes out. She's probably calling everyone I know with the same story. Who else would they call? Marcus asked, and I could hear the anger building in his voice. My friends, my coworkers, maybe even my landlord. Anyone who might support me or believe my side of the story. I was quiet for a moment, thinking through the implications. Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Did any part of you believe what my mother told you? I was confused, he admitted. Your family has always seemed a little intense, but they've never struck me as dishonest. When your mom was crying on the phone about being worried for your safety, it seemed genuine. I was actually planning to come over tonight to check on you and maybe suggest you talk to someone professional. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My own boyfriend, someone who knew me well and cared about me, had been ready to believe I was mentally unstable based on a single phone call from my mother. If Marcus could be swayed so easily, how many other people in my life would believe their lies? I need to make some calls, I told Marcus. I think they've been contacting more people than just you. Over the next few hours, I discovered the full scope of their smear campaign. My best friend Sarah had received a call from Emma claiming I was jealous of the family and spreading malicious lies because I was angry about being asked to contribute more financial support. My coworker Jennifer had been contacted by my Aunt Carol, who explained that I was having family problems and might need professional help dealing with my persecution complex. Most devastating of all, my landlord, Mr. Patterson, had received a call from my father warning him that I might be going through a difficult time and could potentially cause problems for other tenants. My father had planted the idea that I might become unstable or dangerous, setting the stage for me to be evicted if my behavior seemed concerning. The systematic nature of their attacks was breathtaking. They hadn't just decided to lie about my mental health. They had created a coordinated campaign to isolate me by turning everyone in my support network against me. They were trying to destroy my relationships, my housing situation, and my credibility all at once. But as I sat in my apartment that evening, surrounded by police reports and bank statements that proved every word I had said, I realized they had made a crucial mistake. Their lies were too elaborate and their timing was too convenient. Anyone who looked at the actual evidence would see that they were lying to cover up criminal behavior. More importantly, I finally understood that this wasn't really about Jake's identity theft. This was about control. As long as I had friends, a relationship, and a stable life outside their dysfunction, I might eventually realize I didn't need them. By isolating me and making me seem unstable, they could ensure I would always come back to them, no matter how badly they treated me. For the first time in my life, I saw their manipulation clearly. And for the first time, I had documented evidence that would protect me from their lies. I woke up Thursday morning feeling more clear-headed than I had in years. The fog of confusion and self-doubt that had clouded my judgment for decades was finally lifting, and I could see my situation with brutal clarity. My family wasn't going to change. They had escalated from emotional manipulation to criminal activity, and they were willing to destroy my reputation and relationships to avoid consequences for their actions. It was time to disappear. I called in sick to work, which wasn't entirely a lie since the stress of the past few days had left me feeling physically drained. Then I drove to 3 different banks across Phoenix and quietly began moving my money around. I had learned long ago not to keep all my funds in accounts my family knew about. Years of their financial emergencies and guilt trips had taught me to maintain a secret savings account for exactly this kind of situation. The account they knew about contained about $3,000, enough to make it seem like I was still accessible, but not enough to devastate me if they found a way to steal it. But the account they didn't know about, the one I had been contributing to for 4 years under the name of my grandmother's maiden name, contained almost $18,000. It was my escape fund, and I was finally ready to use it. While I was at the bank, my phone rang with a call from my father. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message while sitting in my car in the parking lot. "Kyle, we need to talk about this police nonsense immediately. You're embarrassing the whole family with these ridiculous accusations, and you're going to get your brother in serious trouble over nothing. Call me back so we can work this out like adults." I deleted the message and drove to a storage unit facility on the other side of town. For $75 a month, I rented a 10 by 10 unit and began the careful process of moving my most important possessions out of my apartment. Photo albums, important documents, my grandmother's jewelry, my good furniture, and anything else that couldn't be easily replaced went into storage. Over the next 2 days, I worked systematically to erase my presence from my current life without arousing suspicion. I researched apartments in Tucson 2 hours away and far enough to make casual visits impossible. I contacted my boss and explained that I was dealing with a family emergency that might require me to relocate for safety reasons. Since I worked in marketing and most of my projects were digital, she agreed to let me work remotely temporarily while I figured out my situation. The hardest part was deciding what to tell Marcus. He had been supportive since learning about my family's lies, but I wasn't sure he would understand why I needed to disappear completely instead of just limiting contact with them. Friday evening, I invited him over for dinner and tried to explain my plan. "You want to move to another city. he asked, setting down his fork and staring at me. Kyle, I understand that your family is toxic, but running away seems extreme. Have you considered just getting a restraining order or changing your phone number? Marcus, they committed felony fraud and then launched a campaign to convince everyone I know that I'm mentally unstable. A restraining order isn't going to stop them from destroying my life piece by piece. But moving to Tucson means leaving your job, your friends, everything you've built here. And what about us? Are you asking me to move with you or are you ending our relationship? I had been dreading this conversation because I didn't have a good answer. I don't know, I said honestly. I know it's not fair to ask you to uproot your life because of my family problems. But I also know that staying here means dealing with their manipulation and sabotage for the rest of my life. What if we moved in together, Marcus suggested. If we're living together, it might be harder for them to manipulate the situation, and you wouldn't be facing this alone. They already convinced you I might be mentally unstable with a single phone call, I reminded him gently. What happens when they escalate to showing up at your workplace or calling your friends or targeting your family? I can't ask you to become their victim too. Marcus was quiet for a long time, and I could see him struggling with the reality of what a relationship with me would mean. My family wouldn't just disappear because we ignored them. They would escalate their attacks until they found something that worked to regain control over me. I need time to think about this, he said finally. This is a lot bigger than I realized. I understand, I said, though my heart was breaking. But Marcus, I need you to know that leaving isn't about running away from my problems. It's about refusing to be their victim anymore. They've spent my entire life making me responsible for their choices and consequences. If I stay, I'm accepting that dynamic forever. That Saturday morning, I woke up to discover my family had made the decision easier for me. My checking account, the one they knew about, had been cleaned out completely. When I called the bank, I learned that my father had used old joint account information from when I was 18 years old to withdraw every penny. Is this legal? I asked the customer service representative. Unfortunately, if he was listed as a joint account holder when you were a minor and you never formally removed him, then technically he still has access rights. It's a common problem when young adults don't update their banking relationships after turning 18. I had never thought to remove my parents from that old checking account because I had opened new accounts for my regular banking. But they had kept the information all these years waiting for an opportunity to use it. The timing wasn't coincidental. They knew I had filed police reports and were probably expecting me to hire a lawyer or take other expensive steps to protect myself. By stealing my easily accessible money, they were trying to make me financially dependent on them again. The irony was that their theft actually confirmed that I was making the right decision. They had just proven they were willing to steal from me directly, not just through Jake's identity fraud. There was no level they wouldn't sink to in order to maintain control over me. I spent Sunday carefully executing the final phase of my plan. I gave my landlord 30 days' notice and paid the early termination fee for breaking my lease. I arranged for a moving company to pick up my remaining belongings the following weekend and take them to my storage unit. I transferred my prescriptions to a pharmacy in Tucson and had my mail forwarded to a P.O. box there. Most importantly, I changed my phone number and gave the new one only to Marcus, my boss, and 2 trusted friends who had seen through my family's lies. I blocked my family on all social media platforms and set my privacy settings to maximum. By Sunday evening, I was ready to disappear completely. My family had taught me to be self-sufficient, though not in the way they intended. Years of being blamed for their problems had made me independent and resourceful. Years of being their financial safety net had taught me to manage money carefully and save for emergencies. They had created exactly the person who was capable of walking away from them forever, and they had no idea what was coming. Monday morning arrived gray and overcast, matching my mood perfectly as I loaded the last of my essential belongings into my Honda Civic. I had timed everything precisely. Jake's court hearing for the drug possession charges was scheduled for 10 a.m., which meant my entire family would be at the courthouse trying to present a united front for the judge. It was the perfect window for my escape. I drove through my old neighborhood one last time past the elementary school, where I had learned to read, past the park where I had spent countless afternoons, pushing Jake and Emma on the swings past the corner store where I had bought candy with my allowance money. Every familiar landmark felt like I was saying goodbye to a different person's life. My apartment looked strange and empty with only the basic furniture that came with the lease. I had left everything exactly as the landlord required, clean and undamaged, ready for the next tenant. On the kitchen counter, I left my old keys and a brief note explaining that I had paid all termination fees and that my forwarding address was on file with the rental office. The drive to Tucson felt like traveling between two different worlds. With each mile that passed, I felt the weight of my family's expectations and demands lifting from my shoulders. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't rushing to handle someone else's crisis or worrying about the next emergency phone call that would drain my bank account. My new apartment was in a quiet complex near the university, surrounded by palm trees and desert landscaping that looked nothing like the suburban sprawl I had grown up in. The one-bedroom unit was smaller than my place in Phoenix, but it felt enormous because it was entirely mine. No one had my address, no one could show up uninvited, and no one could demand anything from me. I spent the first day unpacking the basics I had brought with me and setting up my laptop for remote work. The silence was both peaceful and unsettling. I was so accustomed to constant family drama that the absence of crisis felt almost unnatural. Tuesday passed quietly. I worked on a marketing campaign for a new pharmaceutical product focusing on social media strategy and demographic targeting. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was designing content about healthy relationships while hiding from my own toxic family. My boss called to check in, and I assured her that my temporary relocation was going smoothly. Wednesday brought the same peaceful routine. I grocery shopped at stores where no one knew me, ate lunch at cafes where I could sit alone without being interrupted by family emergencies, and took evening walks through neighborhoods where I didn't have to worry about running into relatives who would lecture me about my responsibilities. It wasn't until Thursday morning that I realized something remarkable my family hadn't noticed I was gone. My phone had been completely silent since Monday. No calls asking for money, no texts demanding emotional support, no voicemails describing the latest crisis I was somehow responsible for solving. The revelation was both liberating and deeply sad. I had spent 28 years believing I was an essential part of their lives, the responsible daughter and sister who held everything together. But 4 days had passed without a single attempt to contact me, which meant they only reached out when they needed something from me. Thursday afternoon, I was working on my laptop in a coffee shop near campus when my phone finally rang. The call was from Emma, and for a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won and I answered. "Kyle," Emma's voice sounded strained and panicked. "Where are you? I've been trying to reach you for hours." "I'm fine," I said carefully. "What do you need?" "Our electricity got shut off this morning, and Mom said you would call the power company to work out a payment plan. She's been trying to call you since yesterday, but your phone keeps going straight to voicemail." "I changed my number," I said, "and I'm not calling the power company for you. That's not my responsibility." "What do you mean it's not your responsibility?" Emma snapped. "You're part of this family, and families help each other. Mom said you would handle this because you're good at talking to customer service people." "Emma, I don't live there anymore. I moved out of Phoenix on Monday." The silence that followed was so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Emma spoke again, and her voice was different. "What do you mean you moved out of Phoenix? Moved where?" "I relocated for work," I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. "I won't be available to handle family emergencies anymore." "You can't just leave without telling anyone," Emma said, her voice rising. "We're your family. You can't abandon us when we need you." "I can, and I did," I said calmly. "You'll need to figure out your own utility bills from now on." "Kyle, wait," Emma said quickly, but I had already hung up. Within an hour, my new phone was buzzing with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. They had probably borrowed phones from friends and neighbors to try to reach me. I let them all go to voicemail and spent the evening listening to increasingly frantic messages. My mother's voice was shrill with panic. "Kyle, this is ridiculous. You can't just disappear when your family needs you. Call me back immediately so we can work this out like adults." My father sounded angry and confused. "What's this nonsense about moving out of Phoenix? Emma said you're refusing to help with the power bill. That's not like you, Kyle. Call me back." Jake's voice was slurred and pathetic. "Kyle, please don't abandon me now. I know I messed up with the credit card thing, but I'm trying to get clean. The family is falling apart without you. We need you." Even my Aunt Carol had left a message. "Kyle, your mother is beside herself with worry. No one knows where you are or if you're safe. This isn't the time to be selfish. Your family needs you to step up and be the bigger person." As I listened to message after message, I realized they still didn't understand what had happened. They thought this was a temporary tantrum, a phase I was going through that would end when I came to my senses and resumed my role as their financial and emotional caretaker. None of them had apologized for the identity theft, the lies they told my friends and boyfriend, or the decades of scapegoating. They were only upset because their support system had disappeared, not because they had hurt me. Friday morning brought a new development that confirmed my worst fears about staying in Phoenix. My former landlord, Mr. Patterson, called my new number. "Kyle, I hope you don't mind that I got your number from your forwarding information, but I thought you should know that your family has been to your old apartment 3 times since Tuesday. They seem to think you might still be living there secretly." "What did you tell them?" I asked. "Nothing specific, just that you had moved out and given proper notice. But your mother seemed very agitated. She kept insisting that you wouldn't leave without telling them, and that something terrible must have happened to you. She wanted me to let her into the apartment to check for signs of foul play." The manipulation was breathtaking. My mother was trying to convince my former landlord that I had been kidnapped or murdered, rather than accepting that I had chosen to leave. She was probably building a narrative that would paint me as a victim of circumstances beyond my control, rather than someone who had made an informed decision to escape their toxicity. "Mr. Patterson, I need you to know that I left voluntarily and I'm safe," I said. "My family has a history of manipulation and dishonesty. Please don't give them any information about where I've gone." "I figured as much when your mother started talking about calling the police to report you as a missing person," he said. "Something about her story didn't add up. Adults don't just vanish without good reasons." After hanging up, I sat in my new living room and felt a deep sense of satisfaction settle over me. They were panicking because their scapegoat had disappeared, but they still hadn't grasped that their behavior had driven me away. They were focused on getting me back under their control rather than examining why I had left in the first place. For the first time in my life, I held all the power in our relationship. They needed me more than I needed them, and they were finally beginning to realize it. The weekend brought an escalation in their desperation that was both satisfying and disturbing to witness from my safe distance in Tucson. Saturday morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and a voicemail box full of increasingly frantic messages. But the most telling communication came in the form of social media posts that friends started forwarding to me. My mother had posted on Facebook, desperately trying to reach my daughter Kyle. She hasn't been answering her phone for days, and we're worried sick. If anyone has heard from her, please ask her to call home. We just want to know she's safe. The post had dozens of comments from family, friends, and distant relatives expressing concern and offering to help search for me. My mother was building a narrative that positioned her as the worried parent of a missing child, rather than the toxic mother whose behavior had driven her daughter away. Emma had taken a different approach on Instagram, posting a photo of our family from last Christmas with the caption, "Missing my sister so much right now. Family means everything, and I can't understand how we got to this place. Kyle, if you're out there, please come home. We love you no matter what." The manipulation was masterful. She was painting herself as the heartbroken sister who couldn't understand why I had abandoned the family, completely erasing the months of lies, theft, and emotional abuse that had led to this moment. But the social media posts revealed something crucial. They genuinely hadn't expected me to disappear completely. They were so accustomed to my reliability, my willingness to sacrifice my own well-being for theirs, that the possibility of me walking away had never seriously occurred to them. Monday brought the reality check they had been avoiding. Without my monthly financial contributions, their house of cards began collapsing immediately. The mortgage payment they had been counting on me to cover was due Tuesday, and they didn't have the money. The car insurance on Emma's vehicle had lapsed because they assumed I would handle the payment as usual. Jake's court-ordered drug testing fees were unpaid because they expected me to take care of legal expenses. I learned about their mounting crisis through my friend Sarah, who had remained loyal to me after seeing the evidence of their lies. Emma had called her in tears, begging for Kyle's new phone number so they could work out this misunderstanding. "She kept saying your family was falling apart without you," Sarah told me during our Tuesday evening phone call. "She said your mom has been crying nonstop and your dad hasn't been eating. She made it sound like you disappearing was killing them slowly." "What did you tell her?" I asked. "I told her that if your family was falling apart, maybe they should ask themselves why their daughter felt the need to disappear without telling them where she was going. I also mentioned that I had seen the police reports about Jake's identity theft, so I knew this wasn't just a family misunderstanding." "How did she react to that?" "She got very quiet, then said she couldn't believe you had shown those private family matters to outsiders. She said you were trying to make the family look bad to justify abandoning them." The pattern was so predictable it was almost comical. Even faced with documented evidence of their criminal behavior, they were still trying to position themselves as the victims of my unreasonable actions. Wednesday brought a development that showed how desperate they had become. My boss, Linda, called me during my lunch break with news that made my blood run cold. "Kyle, I thought you should know that someone claiming to be you called our main office this morning, saying you had a family emergency and needed to take extended leave. When HR asked for details, the caller hung up." "Someone was impersonating me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "We think so. The voice didn't quite sound like you, and the caller didn't know basic details about your position or current projects. We think someone in your family was fishing for information about your whereabouts or employment status." "Was it a woman's voice?" "Yes, probably your age or a little younger. HR is documenting the incident in case it happens again." The fact that Emma or my mother had called my workplace pretending to be me revealed a new level of boundary violation. They weren't just trying to manipulate my personal relationships anymore. They were actively interfering with my professional life, potentially putting my job at risk. But their desperation was also revealing their weakness. The family that had seemed so powerful and controlling when I was trapped in their system was proving to be remarkably fragile when their primary support system disappeared. Without me to blame for their problems and pay for their mistakes, they were being forced to confront the reality of their dysfunction. Thursday evening brought the call I had been expecting. Marcus's name appeared on my phone screen, and I answered with a mixture of hope and dread. "I've been thinking about our conversation all week," he said without preamble. "I understand why you felt like you had to leave Phoenix, and I don't think you're running away from your problems. I think you're protecting yourself from people who were destroying your life." "Thank you for understanding," I said softly. "I know it's not fair that my family drama affected our relationship. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. Your mother called me again yesterday, and this time she was crying about how worried they are about you. She said they're afraid you might hurt yourself because you've been acting so irrationally lately. And you didn't believe her. Not for a second, but Kyle, it made me realize that they're never going to stop trying to manipulate the situation. Even if you stay in Tucson, they're going to keep calling people in your life, trying to convince them that you're unstable or in danger. I know, I said. That's why I changed my number and blocked them on social media. But I can't control who they call or what lies they tell. What if you didn't have to control it? Marcus asked. What if we made it impossible for them to reach the people who matter to you? What do you mean? I mean, what if I moved to Tucson with you? If we're together and building a life in a new place, they can't isolate you or convince your support system that you're having a breakdown. They'll have to accept that you're an adult who made a rational decision to protect herself. The offer was more generous than I had dared to hope for, but I had to be realistic about what it would mean for him. Marcus, they'll target you too if you're with me. They'll call your family your friends, your coworkers. They'll try to convince everyone that I'm manipulating you or that you're enabling my mental illness. Let them try, Marcus said firmly. The difference is that I know the truth and I have the evidence to back it up. If they want to make this a public battle, they're going to lose because the facts are on our side. Are you sure about this? Moving to a new city, dealing with my toxic family, starting over completely. Kyle, I've spent the last week imagining my life without you and I don't like what I see. Yes, your family is terrible and yes, they're going to make things difficult. But you're worth fighting for and I'm not going to let them win by default. For the first time since leaving Phoenix, I felt tears building in my eyes. But these weren't tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of relief, gratitude, and something I had almost forgotten existed: hope. When can you start looking for jobs in Tucson? I asked. I already have, Marcus said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I have 3 interviews scheduled for next week. By Friday of my second week in Tucson, my family had escalated their tactics in ways that would have been unthinkable to me just months before. Sarah called me that evening with news that chilled me to the bone. Kyle, you need to know that someone created a fake Facebook profile using your name and photos, she said without preamble. They're posting things that make you look completely unstable. What kind of things? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Rambling posts about how your family abused you, but written in a way that makes you sound paranoid and delusional. Stuff like claiming your parents poisoned your food and that Jake tried to kill you. Obviously, fake accusations that make your real complaints seem ridiculous by comparison. The sophistication of their manipulation took my breath away. They weren't just lying about me anymore. They were creating fake evidence that would discredit my legitimate accusations by making me appear mentally ill. The scary part is that people who don't know you well might believe it, Sarah continued. The fake posts are designed to make anyone who reads them think you've had a complete psychotic break. They're painting you as someone who's lost touch with reality and is making increasingly wild accusations against innocent family members. Have you reported the fake profile to Facebook? I asked. I tried, but it's going to take time for them to investigate. In the meantime, this fake version of you is commenting on mutual friends' posts, sending bizarre messages to people, and generally making you look like someone who needs immediate psychiatric intervention. Saturday brought an escalation that made the fake social media profile look tame by comparison. My new landlord in Tucson, Mrs. Chen, knocked on my door Saturday morning with a concerned expression and a printed email in her hand. Kyle, I received a very disturbing message about you that I think you should see, she said, handing me the paper. I wanted to talk to you directly before making any decisions. The email was from someone claiming to be my former landlord in Phoenix, warning Mrs. Chen that I was a dangerous tenant with a history of property destruction and threats against neighbors. The message claimed I had been evicted from my previous apartment after attacking another tenant during a psychotic episode. "This is completely false," I told Mrs. Chen, my hands shaking as I read the fabricated accusations. "My former landlord can verify that I left voluntarily with proper notice and no damage to the property. This email is part of a harassment campaign by my family." I thought it might be something like that," Mrs. Chen said kindly. "The person who sent it seemed to know very specific details about your new address, which struck me as odd for someone in Phoenix who shouldn't have that information. I can provide you with contact information for my real former landlord as well as documentation showing that I paid all fees and left the property in perfect condition," I offered. "That won't be necessary." The tone of the email felt malicious rather than genuinely concerned. "But I wanted you to know that someone is actively trying to sabotage your housing situation." After Mrs. Chen left, I sat in my apartment trying to process the scope of their campaign. They weren't just trying to convince people I was mentally unstable. They were actively trying to destroy my ability to maintain housing employment and relationships in my new life. Marcus called that afternoon with similar news from Phoenix. "Your family showed up at my apartment complex this morning, telling the property manager that they were worried about my safety because I was dating someone who had been institutionalized for violent behavior," he reported. "Please tell me you documented that," I said. "I did better than that. I recorded the entire conversation on my phone. Your mother was very specific about the lies she was telling, claiming you had attacked family members and been hospitalized for psychiatric treatment multiple times." "Marcus, this is getting dangerous. They're not just lying anymore. They're creating an entire fictional narrative that could destroy both our lives." "Which is exactly why I called the police and filed a harassment report," Marcus said. "I also contacted my property manager with documentation showing that their claims were false, including the police reports about Jake's identity theft." Sunday brought the most disturbing development yet. I was grocery shopping when my phone rang with a call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Is this Kyle Thompson?" asked a woman's voice I didn't recognize. "Yes, who is this?" "This is Detective Maria Santos with the Phoenix Police Department. I'm calling because your family has filed a missing person report claiming you disappeared under suspicious circumstances and may be the victim of foul play." My stomach dropped. "Detective Santos, I'm not missing. I relocated voluntarily and I'm perfectly safe." "That's what I suspected when I reviewed the case file," she said. "Your family claims they haven't heard from you in 2 weeks, and that it's completely out of character for you to cut off contact. However, our records show you filed identity theft reports against your brother just before your supposed disappearance." "Yes, Jake stole my identity, and my family covered it up. I left Phoenix to escape their manipulation and harassment." "I figured as much. Your family's story has several inconsistencies, and the timing of the missing person report is suspicious. It seems like they're using our department to try to locate someone who doesn't want to be found." "Is there anything I need to do legally to protect myself?" I asked. "I'm going to close the missing person case and document that you're safe and relocated voluntarily. If they continue to file false reports, we can pursue charges for misuse of police resources. I'd also recommend documenting any further harassment attempts." After hanging up, I realized the true scope of what my family was willing to do. They had involved law enforcement in their manipulation campaign, potentially wasting police resources on a fabricated emergency. They were so desperate to regain control over me that they were willing to lie to authorities and create false official records. That evening, I called Marcus with an update on the detective's call and the fake missing person report. "Kyle, this has gone beyond family drama," Marcus said. "They're committing actual crimes now, filing false police reports, creating fake online profiles, sending fraudulent emails to your landlord. This is organized harassment." "I know, and I'm documenting everything," I said. But Marcus, I need you to understand what you're getting into. If you move here, they're going to target you with the same tactics. They'll try to destroy your reputation, your job prospects, everything. Let them try, Marcus said firmly. The difference is that now we know what they're capable of and we're prepared for it. They succeeded in isolating you for years because you thought you had to handle their abuse alone. But you don't anymore. Are you sure about this? Kyle, I've watched you transform over the past 2 weeks. You're stronger, happier, and more confident than I've ever seen you. Whatever they put us through, it's worth it to see you become the person you were meant to be. For the first time since discovering Jake's identity theft, I felt genuinely hopeful about the future. My family had revealed themselves to be capable of shocking cruelty and criminal behavior, but they had also revealed their weakness. Every desperate tactic they tried made them look more unhinged and less credible. They were destroying their own credibility in their frantic attempts to destroy mine. The 3rd week of my new life in Tucson brought changes I hadn't expected. Without the constant stress of family emergencies and emotional manipulation, I found myself sleeping through the night for the first time in years. My chronic headaches disappeared, my appetite returned, and I had energy for activities beyond work and worry. Monday morning, I woke up early and decided to go for a run through the desert trails near my apartment complex. The Arizona sunrise painted the sky in brilliant shades of pink and orange, and the mountains in the distance looked like something from a postcard. As I jogged past cacti and desert wildflowers, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I had done something just for my own enjoyment. At work, the change was even more dramatic. Without family crises interrupting my concentration every few hours, my productivity soared. I completed a major marketing campaign 2 days ahead of schedule and presented innovative ideas for targeting younger demographics that impressed both my boss and our clients. Kyle, whatever you're doing differently lately, keep it up, Linda told me during our weekly video conference. Your work has been exceptional these past few weeks. You seem more focused and creative than I've seen you in years. I've just been able to concentrate better lately, I said, not wanting to go into details about my family situation with my supervisor. Well, whatever it is, the client specifically requested that you lead their next campaign. This could be a significant career advancement opportunity if you're interested. The offer would mean a promotion, a substantial raise, and the chance to build a reputation in the Tucson market rather than working remotely. For the first time in my adult life, I was being rewarded for my professional capabilities rather than being held back by family obligations. Tuesday evening, I was reading in the courtyard of my apartment complex when my neighbor from the unit across from mine approached with a friendly smile. Helen Rodriguez was a retired federal judge who had moved to Tucson after 30 years on the bench in Colorado. She was in her 70s, but had the sharp eyes and confident posture of someone accustomed to authority. I hope you don't mind my saying so, but you seem much more relaxed lately than when you first moved in, Helen said, settling into the chair across from me. Those first few days, you looked like someone running from something scary. That's not entirely inaccurate, I admitted. I left Phoenix to escape some family problems. Family can be the most difficult people to protect yourself from, Helen said with the wisdom of someone who had seen countless family court cases. They know exactly which buttons to push because they installed those buttons in the first place. Over the next hour, Helen and I talked about toxic family dynamics, legal protections for harassment victims, and the psychology of family scapegoating. Her insights helped me understand that what I had experienced wasn't unique or personal. It was a well-documented pattern of abuse that played out in thousands of families across the country. The hardest part for most people is accepting that family members can be genuinely harmful, Helen explained. We're taught from childhood that family love is unconditional and that blood relationships are sacred. But some people are toxic regardless of their genetic connection to you. Did I do the right thing by disappearing completely? I asked. From what you've told me about their behavior, you did the only thing that would actually protect you, Helen said firmly. Toxic people don't respond to boundaries, negotiations, or appeals to their better nature. They only understand consequences, and the most effective consequence for abuse is removal of access to their victim. Wednesday brought a development that proved Helen's point perfectly. Sarah called me with an update on the situation in Phoenix that left me both vindicated and sad. Emma came to see me today, Sarah reported. She wanted to talk about you, and I think she's finally starting to understand what really happened. What did she say? She admitted that the identity theft was worse than they initially told you, and that they knew about it for over a month before you found out. She also said your parents have been struggling financially for years and have been using your money to cover basic expenses while telling you it was for emergencies. So they were stealing from me consistently, not just covering for Jake's fraud. It sounds like it. Emma said your mother would call you about Jake's supposed medical bills or Emma's car repairs, but actually use the money for mortgage payments and groceries. They've been deceiving you about their financial situation for years. Did Emma apologize? She tried to, but honestly, Kyle, it felt like she was more sorry about getting caught than sorry about hurting you. She kept saying things like, "We never meant for it to go this far, and we didn't think you'd actually leave forever." They still don't understand that their behavior was abusive, not just inconvenient, I said. That's exactly what I told her. I said that stealing someone's identity, lying to their friends and boyfriend, and then launching a smear campaign when they protect themselves isn't a family misunderstanding. It's criminal behavior. How did she react to that? She got defensive and said you were being dramatic about normal family problems. Then she asked if I knew where you were because they wanted to fix things and move forward as a family. Even now, they think this is something that can be fixed with a conversation. Emma doesn't understand that trust once broken this badly can't be repaired with apologies and promises. She's still thinking about this like a temporary family fight rather than the end of a relationship. Thursday evening, Marcus called with news that made everything feel more real and hopeful. I got the job, he said without preamble. Software development position with a healthcare company in Tucson. I can start in 3 weeks. Marcus. That's incredible, I said, feeling tears of joy building in my eyes. Are you sure about this, leaving Phoenix, leaving your life there? Kyle, I've never been more sure of anything. These past 3 weeks have shown me what my life looks like without you in it, and I don't want that life. I want to build something new with you, somewhere your family can't reach us. What about your apartment, your friends, your routine? My lease is up next month anyway, and my real friends support my decision to move. As for my routine, it mostly involved worrying about your family and trying to help you manage their crises. I'm looking forward to a routine that involves building our relationship instead of managing their dysfunction. Friday afternoon brought an encounter that crystallized how much my life had changed. I was at the grocery store when I ran into a woman around my age who looked vaguely familiar. "Excuse me, are you Kyle Thompson?" she asked hesitantly. "Yes," I said, immediately tensing for another family-related confrontation. "I thought I recognized you. I'm Jessica Martinez. I moved here from Phoenix about 2 years ago, and I think we have something in common." What do you mean?" "I saw the fake Facebook posts about you, and they reminded me of what my family did when I left them. Similar tactics, same kind of manipulation campaign. I wanted you to know that you're not alone and that it does get better." Over coffee that afternoon, Jessica told me her story of escaping a toxic family that had used her as their emotional dumping ground and financial safety net. Her parents had launched a similar smear campaign when she disappeared, complete with fake social media posts and calls to her workplace. "The first year was hard because I felt guilty and kept wondering if I had overreacted," Jessica said. "But now, 3 years later, I can see how much happier and healthier I am without their constant drama. I have genuine friends, a career I love, and a partner who supports me instead of expecting me to fix his problems. Do you ever miss them? I miss the fantasy version of them, the family I always hoped they could become. But I don't miss the reality of being blamed for everything stolen from and treated like their personal ATM and therapist. Have they ever tried to reconnect? A few times, usually when they need money or emotional support, but I've stayed strong and eventually they stopped trying. The truth is, they don't miss me as a person. They miss what I provided for them. Meeting Jessica felt like a gift from the universe. She was living proof that escaping toxic family dynamics was not only possible, but transformative. Seeing her confidence, her genuine happiness, and her peaceful life gave me a vision of what my future could look like. That evening, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint the desert mountains in brilliant colors, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades: complete peace. No family crisis was brewing, no emergency call was coming, and no one was waiting for me to fix their problems or take responsibility for their mistakes. For the first time in my adult life, I was just Kyle, not the family scapegoat, not the emergency contact, not the financial safety net, just a woman building her own life on her own terms, surrounded by people who valued her for who she was rather than what she could provide. I woke up on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 month after leaving Phoenix, to discover my phone buzzing incessantly on my nightstand. The screen showed 53 missed calls, all from different numbers I didn't recognize. My heart sank as I realized what this meant. Something had happened that my family considered serious enough to warrant an emergency contact campaign. The voicemails told the story in heartbreaking detail. My grandfather, the one person in my family who had ever shown me unconditional love and support, had suffered a massive heart attack Monday evening. He was in intensive care at Phoenix General Hospital, and according to my mother's tearful voicemail, he was asking for me. "Gosh, Kyle, this is Mom calling on Tuesday morning." Her voice sounded strained and desperate through the phone speaker. "Grandpa had a heart attack last night, and the doctors don't think he's going to make it. He keeps asking where you are and why you haven't come to see him. You need to get here immediately and handle the arrangements because you're the only one who's good at dealing with hospitals and insurance companies. We're all too emotional to think clearly right now." Emma's message was more manipulative. "Kyle, I know you're angry at the family, but Grandpa is dying, and he doesn't understand why his favorite granddaughter abandoned him. You can't let your pride keep you from saying goodbye to the man who raised us. He's been asking for you constantly, and it's breaking his heart that you're not here." Jake's voicemail was barely coherent through his sobs. "Kyle, please come home. Grandpa is dying and everything is falling apart without you. We can't handle the medical decisions and the funeral planning and everything else. You're the only one who knows how to deal with this stuff. Please don't let him die thinking you don't love him." Even my Aunt Carol had left a message. "Kyle, whatever problems you have with the family need to be set aside right now. Your grandfather is asking for you specifically, and you have a responsibility to be here for him in his final hours. This is bigger than your personal feelings." The emotional manipulation was breathtaking in its scope and calculation. They were using my grandfather's medical crisis as leverage to force me back into their toxic system, counting on my love for him to override my self-preservation instincts. But something about their messages felt off. In all the years I had known my grandfather, he had never relied on my parents for medical or financial decision-making. He was a retired accountant who had always managed his own affairs with characteristic independence and precision. The idea that he would suddenly need me to handle insurance companies and hospital arrangements didn't match the competent, organized man who had helped raise me. I called the hospital directly and asked to speak with someone about my grandfather's condition. After being transferred to the ICU, I spoke with a nurse who gave me information that contradicted everything my family had told me. "Mr. Thompson is stable and recovering well from his procedure," the nurse said. He had what we call a cardiac event, but it was caught early and treated successfully with angioplasty. He should be able to go home in a few days with some lifestyle modifications. Is he asking for family members? I asked. He's been very calm and hasn't requested any specific visitors. His immediate family has been here since yesterday, and he seems comfortable with their support. The relief that my grandfather was going to be fine was immediately replaced by rage at my family's deception. They had exaggerated his condition to manufacture an emergency that would force my return. They were so desperate to regain control over me that they were willing to lie about a medical crisis. I called the hospital back and asked to be connected directly to my grandfather's room. His voice was weak but clear when he answered. "Grandpa, it's Kyle," I said. "How are you feeling?" "Kyle, sweetheart." His voice brightened immediately. "I'm doing much better now. The doctors say I'll be home by Friday if I keep improving like this." "Grandpa, I'm calling because I got messages saying you were asking for me. Is that true?" There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. "Kyle, I did ask about you, but only because your parents kept saying they were trying to reach you about my situation. I told them you probably had your own life to worry about and didn't need to be bothered with an old man's heart problems. They made it sound like you were dying and desperately wanted to see me." "Dying." My grandfather chuckled, though it turned into a slight cough. "Honey, I had a blocked artery, not a terminal diagnosis. The procedure went perfectly, and I'll be back to my normal routine within a month." "Grandpa, there's something I need to tell you about why I haven't been in Phoenix lately," I said, and then spent 20 minutes explaining the identity theft, the lies, and the harassment campaign that had driven me to relocate. My grandfather listened without interruption, occasionally making small sounds of disapproval or concern. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Weems, Kyle. I'm proud of you for protecting yourself," he said finally. "I've watched your parents lean on you financially and emotionally for years, and I've been concerned about how much they expect from you. What you've described sounds like they crossed lines that should never be crossed. You're not disappointed that I left without saying goodbye?" "Disappointed, Kyle. You're a grown woman who made a difficult but necessary decision to protect herself from harmful people. The fact that those people happen to be related to you doesn't change the fact that you did what you had to do. They said you needed me to handle medical arrangements and insurance companies." "That's ridiculous. I've been managing my own affairs for 78 years, and I don't plan to stop now. Kyle, I think your family is using my medical situation to try to manipulate you into coming back. Don't let them do it." After hanging up, I sat in my apartment trying to process what had just happened. My family had fabricated a medical emergency, complete with emotional manipulation about a dying grandfather, to force me back into their control. They had used my love for my grandfather as a weapon against me, counting on my sense of duty and guilt to override my logical decision to protect myself. The 53 missed calls weren't about my grandfather's well-being. They were about their panic at losing their primary source of financial and emotional support. They had waited exactly 1 month to see if I would come back on my own, and when I didn't, they manufactured a crisis designed to force my return. But their manipulation had backfired in a way they couldn't have anticipated. Instead of guilting me into resuming my role as their caretaker, they had revealed the true depth of their willingness to deceive and manipulate me. They had shown me that no crisis was too sacred, no relationship too important for them to exploit in their desperate attempts to maintain control. I spent the rest of that Tuesday documenting their lies about my grandfather's condition, saving voicemails, and adding their fabricated medical emergency to the growing file of evidence I was building about their harassment campaign. For the first time since leaving Phoenix, I felt completely certain that I had made the right decision. People who would lie about a medical emergency to manipulate their daughter back into an abusive situation were people I could never trust again, regardless of their genetic relationship to me. That evening, Marcus called to check on me after hearing about my grandfather's situation through mutual friends. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "I heard about your grandfather's heart attack." "Marcus, they lied about everything," I said, and then explained what I had learned from talking directly to the hospital and my grandfather. "Jesus, Kyle, they manufactured a fake medical emergency to try to manipulate you back home. That's beyond toxic behavior. That's actually psychotic." The worst part is that it almost worked. For about 20 minutes this morning, I was planning to drive back to Phoenix because I thought my grandfather was dying and needed me. What changed your mind? Something about their messages felt off, so I called the hospital directly. If I had just trusted their version of events, I would be back in Phoenix right now, trapped in their dysfunction again. "This proves you made the right decision to leave," Marcus said firmly. "People who would exploit a medical emergency for manipulation purposes are not people you can ever have a healthy relationship with." "I know, but Marcus, it's scary how close I came to falling for it. Even after everything they've done, part of me still wants to believe they might actually care about me." "That's because you're a good person with a normal capacity for love and trust. The fact that you still hope for the best from them doesn't make you weak. It makes you human, but it also makes you vulnerable to their manipulation." "How do I protect myself from falling for their tactics in the future?" "You document everything. Verify information independently, and remember that people who truly care about you don't manufacture emergencies to control your behavior." "Kyle, you've been away from them for a month, and you're already happier, healthier, and more successful. That's not a coincidence." As I fell asleep that night, I thought about how different my life would be if I had believed their lies about my grandfather's condition. I would be back in Phoenix, probably paying for medical expenses they couldn't afford, handling arrangements they were perfectly capable of managing themselves, and trapped once again in the role of family caretaker and problem solver. Instead, I was safe in my own apartment in a city where I was building a genuine life surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, rather than what I could provide for them. My grandfather was recovering, while my career was thriving, and Marcus was moving to Tucson to build a future with me. Their desperation was becoming my liberation. 2 weeks after the fabricated medical emergency, I received a call that changed everything. My grandfather's lawyer, Robert Sterling, contacted me directly with news that sent my family into a tailspin they never saw coming. "Miss Thompson, I'm calling because your grandfather has asked me to update his will, and he's specifically requested that you be present for the reading," Mr. Sterling said in his measured professional tone. "He's recovered completely from his cardiac procedure and wants to ensure his affairs are properly arranged." "Is he making changes because of his health scare?" I asked. "Actually, he's been planning these changes for several months. The recent medical event just motivated him to finalize everything more quickly. Miss Thompson, your grandfather has asked me to tell you that he's been aware of your family situation for quite some time, and his decisions reflect that awareness." The will reading was scheduled for the following Friday at Mr. Sterling's office in Phoenix. My grandfather had specifically requested that I attend along with my parents, Emma and Jake. What none of them knew was that he had been quietly investigating their treatment of me for over a year. I drove to Phoenix Thursday evening and checked into a hotel near the lawyer's office. The thought of being in the same city as my family made my skin crawl, but my grandfather had been the one person who had always supported me unconditionally. If he wanted me there for his will reading, I would respect his wishes. Friday morning, I arrived at the law office to find my family already assembled in the waiting room. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. My mother's eyes were red and puffy, suggesting she had been crying. Emma looked nervous and fidgety, constantly checking her phone. Jake appeared to be struggling to stay focused, probably still dealing with withdrawal symptoms from his latest attempt at sobriety. My father was the first to notice me. "Kyle," he said, standing up with a mixture of relief and frustration. "Finally, we need to talk about this nonsense you've been pulling. disappearing without telling anyone, refusing to help with family emergencies. "We're not here to talk about family drama," I said calmly, taking a seat as far away from them as possible. "We're here because Grandpa requested our presence for his will reading." "Kyle, please," my mother said, her voice breaking. "We know you're angry about the credit card situation, but we can work that out. You can't keep punishing the whole family because of one misunderstanding." "Identity theft isn't a misunderstanding, Mom. It's a felony." Before anyone could respond, Mr. Sterling's secretary invited us into the conference room. My grandfather was already seated at the head of the table, looking remarkably healthy and alert for someone who had supposedly been at death's door 2 weeks earlier. "Kyle," he said warmly, standing to give me a hug. "Thank you for coming, sweetheart. I know this wasn't easy for you." "I'm just glad you're feeling better, Grandpa," I said, hugging him back and noting how strong and steady he felt. "Much better indeed. In fact, I feel clear-headed enough to make some important decisions about my estate." His eyes swept over the rest of the family with an expression I had never seen before, disappointment mixed with determination. Mr. Sterling opened a thick folder and pulled out several documents. "We're here today for the reading of Harold Thompson's revised last will and testament, executed 3 weeks ago and properly witnessed according to Arizona state law." My family leaned forward expectantly. I knew they were counting on inheriting my grandfather's house, which was worth at least $400,000, plus his savings and investments. They had been making plans for that money for years, discussing how to divide it and what they would do with their portions. "Harold Thompson, being of sound mind and body, does hereby revoke all previous wills and codicils," Mr. Sterling began reading in his formal lawyer voice. "I leave my entire estate, including my home, all financial accounts, investments, and personal property to my granddaughter Kyle Thompson with the following explanation." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. My family's faces went through a rapid succession of emotions, confusion, disbelief, and finally rage. "There must be some mistake," my father said, his voice sharp. "Dad, you can't leave everything to Kyle. What about the rest of us? What about Emma's kids? What about Jake's medical expenses?" My grandfather's expression didn't change. "Bob, please continue reading the letter I dictated." Mr. Sterling cleared his throat and continued. "To my son, Robert, and daughter-in-law, Patricia, I leave nothing because you have spent years financially and emotionally exploiting my granddaughter Kyle while taking credit for her successes and blaming her for your failures. I have watched you steal her money, destroy her relationships, and treat her as your personal ATM and scapegoat." My mother's face went white. "Harold, this is ridiculous. We never exploited Kyle. We're a close family who supports each other through difficult times." "Please don't interrupt," Mr. Sterling said firmly, then continued reading. "To my granddaughter, Emma, I leave nothing because you actively participated in identity theft against your sister and then helped orchestrate a campaign to discredit her when she protected herself. Your behavior has been cruel and criminal." Emma started crying, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage and frustration at losing money she had been counting on. "This isn't fair," she sobbed. "Kyle turned our whole family against each other. She's the one who destroyed our relationships." To my grandson, Jake, Mr. Sterling continued, "I leave nothing because you committed felony fraud against your sister and showed no remorse for nearly destroying her credit and financial future. Your addiction does not excuse your criminal behavior." Jake started to stand up, his face flushed with anger, but my grandfather held up a hand to stop him. "Sit down, Jake. Bob, please read the rest." "I am leaving everything to Kyle because she is the only member of this family who has consistently shown integrity, responsibility, and genuine care for others. She has been financially supporting all of you for years, while being blamed and scapegoated for problems she didn't create. This inheritance is not a gift. It is restitution for years of exploitation and abuse." The room erupted in shouting. My father was demanding to contest the will my mother was crying about being betrayed by her own father-in-law. And Emma was screaming that I had manipulated my grandfather against the family. But Mr. Sterling wasn't finished. He pulled out another document and waited for the noise to die down. "There's more," he announced. Harold Thompson also prepared a video testimony explaining his decisions recorded in this office 3 weeks ago in the presence of 2 witnesses. The large monitor on the conference room wall flickered to life, showing my grandfather seated in the same chair he was sitting in now, but looking directly into the camera with a serious expression. "If you're watching this video, it means I've passed away, and my will has been read," his recorded voice said clearly. "I want there to be no doubt about my mental state or my reasons for leaving my entire estate to Kyle." The video continued for 20 minutes with my grandfather methodically detailing years of observed abuse, financial manipulation, and emotional exploitation. He described specific incidents where he had witnessed my family blaming me for their problems, demanding money from me, and treating me as their personal problem solver rather than as a beloved family member. "I've watched Kyle send money every month to support people who show her no gratitude, only criticism," his recorded voice said. "I have seen her blamed for Jake's addiction, Emma's poor choices, and Robert and Patricia's financial irresponsibility. I have watched this family take and take from Kyle while giving her nothing but grief in return." The most damning part came near the end of the video. 3 months ago, I hired a private investigator to document my family's financial dealings with Kyle. The investigator discovered that Robert and Patricia have been lying to Kyle about family emergencies and using her money for personal expenses for over 5 years. They have stolen approximately $60,000 from her through fabricated crises and fake emergencies. My family's faces were masks of shock and horror. They had no idea my grandfather had been investigating them, and they certainly hadn't expected him to document their deception so thoroughly. My grandfather's recorded voice continued. "If you're watching this, I want you to know that leaving my estate to you isn't charity, it's justice. You've been supporting this family financially and emotionally for years, while being treated as their scapegoat and their servant. This money belongs to you as compensation for what they've stolen from you, both financially and emotionally." The video ended with my grandfather looking directly into the camera. "To the rest of my family, if you're angry about my decisions, ask yourselves why Kyle felt the need to disappear completely rather than maintain a relationship with any of you. The answer to that question is why you're not inheriting anything from me." When the screen went dark, the conference room was silent, except for the sound of my mother's quiet sobbing. My father's face was red with rage, but he seemed to understand that arguing with a video recording would make him look foolish. "This is unbelievable," Emma finally said. "Kyle, you manipulated a sick old man into changing his will. This is elder abuse." My grandfather, very much alive and alert, turned to Emma with a steady gaze. "Emma, I'm sitting right here and I can assure you that my mind is perfectly clear. Kyle had no knowledge of these changes until today. I made these decisions based on my own observations of how this family treats her." "But Grandpa," Jake said desperately, "we're family, blood family. That has to mean something." "Being related by blood doesn't excuse cruel behavior," my grandfather replied. "Kyle is the only one among you who has ever treated me or anyone else in this family with consistent respect and kindness. She's the only one who deserves to inherit what I've worked my whole life to build." Mr. Sterling concluded the meeting by explaining the legal protections my grandfather had put in place. The video testimony, witness statements, and private investigators' report would make contesting the will extremely difficult. My grandfather had been thorough in documenting his decision-making process and mental competency. As we filed out of the conference room, my family's true colors emerged completely. There were no expressions of grief for my grandfather's eventual passing, No sadness about family relationships being destroyed. There was only rage about losing money they had been counting on. "This isn't over," my father told me in the parking lot. "We'll contest this will and we'll win. You can't steal our inheritance." "It was never your inheritance," I said calmly, "and I didn't steal anything. Grandpa made his decision based on your behavior, not my manipulation." "Kyle, please," my mother pleaded. "Can't we work something out? Split the inheritance fairly among everyone?" "Mom, you just heard 20 minutes of documented evidence that you've been stealing from me for years. The only fair outcome is that I finally stop being your victim." As I drove back to Tucson that afternoon, I felt a mixture of emotions I struggled to process. Grief for the family relationships that were now permanently destroyed. Gratitude for my grandfather's protection and validation. Relief that I would have financial security for the first time in my adult life, and a deep sense of justice finally being served. My grandfather had given me more than money. He had given me documented proof that I wasn't crazy, I wasn't selfish, and I wasn't responsible for my family's dysfunction. He had validated my decision to protect myself and ensured that I would have the resources to build a completely independent life. For the first time in my adult life, I was truly free. The phone call came exactly 1 week after the will reading. Mr. Sterling's voice was calm but serious when he delivered the news I had been expecting. "Kyle, your family has filed a lawsuit contesting your grandfather's will. They're claiming undue influence and questioning his mental competency when he made the changes." "What does that mean for me?" I asked, though I was more curious than worried. My grandfather had been incredibly thorough in his preparations. "It means we go to court and present the extensive evidence your grandfather compiled to support his decisions. Frankly, I think they've made a serious mistake by challenging this will publicly." Mr. Sterling was right. What my family intended as a legal challenge to regain their inheritance became a public documentation of their abusive behavior. During the discovery phase of the lawsuit, every lie they had told, every manipulation they had attempted, and every dollar they had stolen became part of the official court record. The private investigator my grandfather had hired, former FBI agent Patricia Wells, had compiled a devastating report on my family's financial exploitation. Her testimony during depositions was methodical and damning. Over the course of 6 months, I documented 47 instances where the plaintiffs contacted Kyle Thompson requesting financial assistance for fabricated or exaggerated emergencies. Wells testified under oath. Bank records show that money requested for specific purposes, such as Jake's medical treatments or Emma's car repairs, was instead used for general household expenses, entertainment, and debt payments unrelated to the stated emergencies. The court records showed that my family had stolen approximately $73,000 from me over 5 years through fabricated crises. What I had thought were occasional emergency loans had actually been systematic financial fraud. But the most damaging testimony came from their own mouths during depositions. Under oath, they were forced to admit to facts that destroyed their credibility completely. My father's deposition was particularly revealing. "Did you or did you not use your daughter's social security number to gain access to her checking account?" the opposing lawyer asked. "I used joint account information that was legally established when she was a minor," my father replied evasively. "Mr. Thompson, were you listed as a joint account holder on that specific account?" "Well, no, but I was her father and I had helped her open accounts in the past." "So you accessed an account without authorization and withdrew money without her knowledge or permission?" "I took money that she owed the family for years of support." "Mr. Thompson, did you inform Kyle before taking this money?" "No." "Did she consent to this withdrawal?" "She would have if she understood the family's needs." My father had just admitted under oath to unauthorized access to my bank account and theft. The same pattern emerged in Emma's deposition about her role in Jake's identity theft, and in my mother's testimony about the lies she told my friends and boyfriend. The most shocking revelation came when Jake's lawyer attempted to argue that his addiction excused his criminal behavior. The prosecution presented evidence that Jake had been selling drugs in addition to using them, and that the money he stole from me through identity theft had been used to purchase inventory for dealing, not just for personal use. Mr. Thompson, you used your sister's credit to purchase items that you then sold for drug money, correct? The prosecutor asked. I needed money to pay back my dealer so he wouldn't hurt me, Jake replied. But you also used some of that money to purchase drugs for resale, didn't you? I had to make money somehow. So you used your sister's stolen identity to fund a drug dealing operation. Jake's admission that he had used my stolen identity to launch a drug business destroyed any sympathy the court might have had for his addiction struggles. He hadn't just been a victim of substance abuse. He had been an active criminal who used my identity to commit multiple felonies. The family's lawyer, clearly realizing how badly the case was going, attempted to argue that my grandfather's video testimony should be excluded because it was recorded when he was under stress from his medical condition. Mr. Sterling's response was swift and decisive. He presented medical records showing that my grandfather's cardiac procedure was minor and that he had been mentally sharp throughout his recovery. More importantly, he presented evidence that my grandfather had been planning these will changes for over a year, well before his medical issues. Your Honor, Mr. Sterling argued, Harold Thompson spent months investigating his family's treatment of his granddaughter. His decision to change his will was not made impulsively or under duress. It was the result of careful consideration and documented evidence of financial and emotional abuse. The turning point in the case came when the judge reviewed the private investigator's report and the video testimony. During a hearing 3 weeks into the legal proceedings, Judge Catherine Morrison made a statement that effectively ended my family's challenge. This court has rarely seen such comprehensive documentation of financial exploitation within a family. Judge Morrison said from the bench, the evidence presented shows a clear pattern of deception, manipulation, and financial abuse spanning multiple years. The testator's mental competency is well documented, and his reasons for disinheriting the plaintiffs are supported by extensive evidence. The judge continued. Furthermore, this lawsuit has revealed potential criminal behavior, including identity theft, financial fraud, and unauthorized access to financial accounts. This court is referring these matters to the district attorney's office for potential prosecution. My family's faces went white when they realized the judge was recommending criminal charges. What they had intended as a civil lawsuit to recover inheritance money had become evidence for potential felony prosecutions. Their lawyer immediately requested a conference with the judge, and within hours they had withdrawn their lawsuit completely, but the damage was done. The court proceedings had become public record, and local media had picked up the story of a family suing their own daughter after years of financial abuse. The Phoenix Herald ran a story titled, "Family Lawsuit Reveals Years of Financial Abuse," which detailed the court revelations about my family's exploitation. The article quoted extensively from the court records and painted a clear picture of systematic manipulation and theft. The case has shocked local legal experts. The article reported because of the extensive documentation of financial and emotional abuse within what appeared to be a typical suburban family. The defendant, who inherited her grandfather's entire estate, had been unknowingly supporting family members who were simultaneously stealing from her through fabricated emergencies and identity theft. Reading about my family's behavior in the newspaper was surreal but also validating. For years, I had questioned whether I was overreacting to their treatment. Seeing their actions described objectively by journalists and legal experts confirmed that my perception had been accurate all along. The public attention also brought unexpected support. I received messages from dozens of people who had experienced similar family dynamics, thanking me for fighting back and inspiring them to protect themselves from toxic relatives. Most importantly, the legal proceedings had created permanent documentation of their abusive behavior. Any future attempts at manipulation or harassment would be viewed in the context of their established pattern of exploitation. The lawsuit they filed to regain control over me had instead created legal protections that would shield me from their toxic influence forever. The newspaper article about my family's lawsuit had consequences none of us anticipated. Within days of publication, my phone started ringing with calls from people I had never met who wanted to share their own stories of family abuse and financial exploitation. The first call came from a woman named Jennifer Chen, a nurse in Phoenix who had read the article and felt compelled to reach out. "I know this might sound strange," Jennifer said, "but reading your story was like reading my own life. My brother has been stealing from me for years, and my parents always make excuses for him while expecting me to keep supporting him financially." "Have you tried setting boundaries?" I asked. "Every time I try, they guilt me into backing down. They say family has to stick together and that I'm being selfish for prioritizing money over relationships. But it's not about money. It's about being treated with basic respect." "Jennifer, it took me years to understand that walking away was an option. I thought I had to keep trying to make the relationship work because they were family. How did you find the strength to leave completely?" "I realized that people who truly love you don't steal your identity lie to your friends or manufacture medical emergencies to manipulate you. Real family doesn't require you to sacrifice your well-being to prove your loyalty." My conversation with Jennifer lasted over an hour, and by the end, she had made the decision to stop sending money to her brother and to seek therapy to help her break free from her family's guilt-based manipulation. The calls kept coming throughout the week. A man named David Rodriguez shared his story of supporting his adult children financially while they showed him no respect or gratitude. A woman named Lisa Park described how her sister had been forging her signature on documents for years while their parents looked the other way. The most heartbreaking call came from Maria Santos, a woman in her 50s who had spent her entire adult life caring for family members who treated her like their personal servant. "I've been paying my daughter's rent for 15 years, Maria told me through tears. "Every time I try to stop, she threatens to keep me away from my grandchildren. I'm supposed to retire next year, but I have no savings because I've been supporting her and her kids." "Maria, that's financial abuse and parental alienation. Your daughter is using your grandchildren as hostages to extort money from you." "But what if she really does keep the kids away from me? They're the only joy I have in my life." What kind of mother teaches her children that love can be bought with money? And what kind of mother uses her children as weapons against their grandmother? "Maria, you can't build genuine relationships with your grandchildren on a foundation of financial coercion." These conversations showed me that my family's behavior wasn't unusual or particularly creative. Financial exploitation of family members was happening in thousands of households across the country, enabled by cultural expectations about family loyalty and supported by social pressure to prioritize blood relationships over personal well-being. The local news station picked up the story after receiving calls from several people who wanted to discuss family financial abuse publicly. I agreed to be interviewed, hoping that sharing my experience might help others recognize similar patterns in their own lives. The interview aired on a Tuesday evening, and my phone didn't stop ringing for 3 days. But these weren't calls from my abusive family members. They were calls from support organizations, therapists who specialized in family trauma, and advocates who worked with financial abuse victims. Dr. Sarah Michaels, a psychologist who ran support groups for people escaping toxic family dynamics, invited me to speak at one of her weekly meetings. "Your story resonates with so many people because family financial abuse is incredibly common. but rarely discussed publicly, Dr. Michaels explained. Most victims feel isolated and ashamed, convinced that they're the only ones experiencing this kind of exploitation. The support group meeting was both heartbreaking and empowering. 12 people shared stories that followed remarkably similar patterns: adult children or siblings who were financially successful being systematically exploited by family members who combined emotional manipulation with cultural expectations about family loyalty. The hardest part is that everyone outside the family thinks you're lucky to have people who need you, said Tom, a software engineer whose parents had been guilting him into supporting his unemployed brother for over a decade. People don't understand that being constantly needed for crisis management isn't the same as being loved. I felt guilty for wanting my own life, added Rachel, a teacher whose sister had been manufacturing emergencies for years to avoid taking responsibility for her own financial problems. Every time I tried to set boundaries, my family convinced me I was being selfish and abandoning my sister in her time of need. Speaking to the support group helped me understand that my decision to disappear completely wasn't extreme or cruel. It was a necessary step that many people in toxic family situations never find the courage to take. The response to my television interview also brought unexpected professional opportunities. Dr. Patricia Wells, the private investigator who had documented my family's financial abuse, contacted me about collaborating on educational materials for financial institutions. Banks and credit unions are starting to recognize family financial abuse as a serious problem, Dr. Wells explained. They want to train their staff to identify warning signs and provide resources for victims. Your willingness to speak publicly about your experience could help protect other people from similar exploitation. The project involved creating training videos and informational materials that financial institutions could use to educate their employees about family financial abuse. My role was to provide the victim's perspective, explaining the psychological dynamics that make it difficult for exploitation victims to recognize and escape abusive situations. Working on the training materials was therapeutic in unexpected ways. Analyzing my family's manipulation tactics from an educational perspective helped me understand the sophisticated psychological techniques they had used to maintain control over me for so many years. Family financial abusers are often very skilled at using cultural values and emotional bonds as weapons. I explained in one of the training videos. They understand that most people want to be good family members, so they frame their exploitation in terms of family loyalty and mutual support. The most rewarding aspect of the community response was connecting with other survivors who had successfully escaped similar situations. These connections formed the foundation of an informal support network that extended far beyond Phoenix and Tucson. Jennifer Chen, the nurse I had spoken with after the newspaper article, became a close friend and ally. She successfully cut off financial support to her manipulative brother and was rebuilding her life on her own terms. I never thought I could be happy disappointing my family, Jennifer told me during one of our regular phone calls, but it turns out that disappointing people who exploit you feels completely different from disappointing people who love you. The community response showed me that my story had value beyond my personal healing. By speaking publicly about family financial abuse, I was helping other people recognize similar patterns in their own lives and giving them permission to protect themselves from exploitation. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like my painful experiences had a purpose beyond teaching me to endure suffering. My family's abuse had inadvertently equipped me to help other people escape similar situations. 3 months after the failed lawsuit, I thought my family had finally accepted that their manipulative tactics were no longer effective. I had underestimated their desperation and their willingness to escalate their harassment to dangerous new levels. The confrontation came on a Tuesday morning in November. I was working in my cubicle at the pharmaceutical company's Tucson office, reviewing social media analytics for our latest campaigns when my supervisor, Linda, approached with a concerned expression. Kyle, there are some people in the lobby claiming to be your family, Linda said quietly. They're asking to see you and they seem pretty upset. Security is with them, but they're insisting it's a family emergency. My heart started racing. Linda, these people have been harassing me for months. I moved to Tucson specifically to get away from them. Do you want me to have security remove them? Yes, but I should probably see what they're doing first. They wouldn't have driven 2 hours just to have a normal conversation. I walked to the lobby with Linda and 2 security guards, preparing myself for whatever manipulation tactic my family had devised this time. What I saw there was more theatrical than I had expected even from them. My mother was sitting in a wheelchair with Jake standing behind her, one arm in a sling and a neck brace around his throat. Emma stood to the side with tears streaming down her face, holding a folder of what appeared to be medical documents. My father was speaking to the security guards with the earnest expression he used when he was trying to convince someone of something untrue. There's my daughter, my mother said loudly when she saw me, her voice carrying across the entire lobby. Kyle, thank God! We've been trying to reach you for days about Jake's accident. The performance was Oscar-worthy in its melodrama. Jake looked genuinely injured. My mother appeared frail and helpless in the wheelchair, and Emma's tears seemed authentic. If I hadn't known them so well, I might have believed that this was a legitimate family emergency. What happened to Jake? I asked, keeping my voice neutral and staying several feet away from them. He was in a terrible car accident last week, my father said, his voice breaking with apparent emotion. He's been asking for you constantly. The doctor said seeing family might help his recovery. The poor boy has been so confused since the accident, my mother added, reaching toward me with a trembling hand. He keeps saying your name and asking why you won't visit him. It was masterful manipulation designed to make me look heartless in front of my coworkers if I didn't respond with sympathy and concern. They were counting on public pressure and my professional environment to force me into resuming my caretaker role. But I had learned to recognize their tactics, and something about Jake's injuries didn't look right. The neck brace was positioned incorrectly, the sling looked loose, and he was standing too steadily for someone who had supposedly been in a serious car accident. Where did the accident happen? I asked. On the freeway between Phoenix and Tucson, Emma said quickly. He was coming to see you when it happened. He's been feeling so guilty about the identity theft situation and wanted to apologize in person. Which hospital treated him? Phoenix General, my father said. Same hospital where your grandfather was treated for his heart attack. The detail felt too convenient, linking Jake's supposed accident to my grandfather's real medical crisis from months earlier. They were trying to create emotional resonance by connecting this fabricated emergency to a genuine family situation. I'd like to see the medical records, I said calmly. Emma thrust the folder toward me. Everything's right here. X-rays, doctor's notes, everything. I glanced through the documents, noting that they looked official but contained several inconsistencies. The dates didn't align properly, the doctor's signatures looked similar to each other, and some of the medical terminology was used incorrectly. These appear to be fake, I said loudly enough for everyone in the lobby to hear clearly. Oh, Kyle, my mother gasped, clutching her chest in apparent shock. How can you accuse your injured brother of faking medical records? What's happened to you? Jake, take off the neck brace, I said firmly. I can't, Jake replied. The doctor said I have to wear it for 6 weeks or I could have permanent nerve damage. If you really have a neck injury serious enough to require a brace, you wouldn't be able to stand and move your head the way you've been doing for the past 10 minutes. The lobby had filled with curious employees who were pretending to work while actually watching the family drama unfold. I realized that my family's public manipulation attempt was about to backfire spectacularly. Security. I'd like you to call Phoenix General Hospital and verify that Jake Thompson was treated there for car accident injuries last week, I said in a clear voice that carried throughout the lobby. Kyle, that's not necessary, my father said quickly. We just came here to see you. This doesn't need to become a big production. It became a big production when you showed up at my workplace with fake medical records and fabricated injuries, I replied. One of the security guards was already on his phone with the hospital. Within 5 minutes, he had confirmation that Jake Thompson had not been treated at Phoenix General for any injuries in the past month. Ma'am, the hospital has no record of treating anyone by that name recently, the security guard reported. The effect on my family was immediate and devastating. Jake started removing the neck brace. My mother suddenly seemed less frail and Emma stopped crying abruptly. Their elaborate performance collapsed in real time as they realized they had been caught lying in front of witnesses. This is a misunderstanding, my father said desperately. Maybe it was a different hospital. Jake has been seeing several doctors. Dad, stop, I said firmly. You drove 2 hours to my workplace with fake medical records and fabricated injuries to try to manipulate me back into your toxic family dynamic. You did this in front of my colleagues and supervisors, potentially damaging my professional reputation. We just wanted to see you, my mother said, abandoning her frail act completely. You're our daughter. We have a right to know where you are and how you're doing. You lost that right when you committed identity theft, lied to my friends, and boyfriend stole my money, and then launched a harassment campaign when I protected myself from your abuse. The lobby was completely silent now. Everyone was watching as I finally confronted my family's manipulation publicly, with witnesses and security cameras recording every word. Kyle, please, Emma said. Can't we just talk privately? This doesn't need to be so dramatic. You made it dramatic when you came here with fake medical records and staged injuries. You made it public when you decided to manipulate me in my workplace. I didn't choose this confrontation, Emma. You brought it here. Linda stepped forward with the security guards. I think it's time for you folks to leave, she said professionally. Kyle has made it clear that she doesn't want contact with you, and attempting to manipulate her with false medical emergencies is inappropriate workplace behavior. We're not leaving without our daughter, my father said stubbornly. Sir Kyle is an adult who has made her position clear, the security guard said firmly. If you don't leave voluntarily, we'll need to call the police for trespassing. The mention of police seemed to break my family's resolve. They had already been through one legal proceeding that had exposed their criminal behavior, and they didn't want another encounter with law enforcement. This isn't over, my mother said as they gathered their fake medical documents and prepared to leave. You can't abandon your family forever, Kyle. We'll keep trying to reach you until you come to your senses. Actually, it is over, I said calmly, and if you contact me or my workplace again, I'll file harassment charges that will result in restraining orders against all of you. As they walked out of the building, Jake limping dramatically despite having no actual injuries, I felt a sense of finality that I hadn't experienced before. They had played their last card, used their most desperate manipulation tactic, and been publicly exposed as liars and fraudsters. The employees who had witnessed the confrontation came forward with words of support and encouragement. Several shared their own stories of toxic family situations and praised my composure during the confrontation. I can't believe they faked medical records, my colleague Jennifer said. That's not just manipulation, that's fraud. The commitment to the performance was impressive, though, added Mark from accounting. Your brother really sold the neck injury until you called him out. Linda called me into her office an hour later to discuss the incident and its impact on my work environment. Kyle, I want you to know that how you handled that situation was professional and appropriate, Linda said. Your family's behavior was completely out of line, and their attempt to manipulate you in our workplace was unacceptable. I'm sorry they brought their drama here, I said. I moved to Tucson specifically to avoid situations like this. You don't need to apologize for being the victim of harassment, but I do want to discuss some additional security measures to make sure this doesn't happen again. The company implemented new policies requiring advance approval for all family visits and additional screening for anyone claiming to represent an employee in an emergency. My family's manipulation attempt had inadvertently improved workplace security for everyone. That evening, Marcus and I filed detailed reports with both the Tucson and Phoenix police departments, documenting the fake medical records, the fabricated emergency, and the workplace harassment. The evidence would support restraining orders if my family continued their manipulation campaign. They really thought they could fake a car accident and trick you into coming back, Marcus said, shaking his head in amazement. The level of deception and manipulation is honestly impressive in its audacity. The scary part is how close it came to working, I admitted. If I hadn't learned to verify their claims independently, I might have believed Jake was injured and felt guilty for not helping. But you didn't fall for it. You stayed calm, asked the right questions, and exposed their lies in front of witnesses. Kyle, you've become someone who can't be manipulated anymore. Looking back on the workplace confrontation, I realized it represented the final evolution of my relationship with my family. They had gone from emotional manipulation to financial theft to criminal harassment, and I had responded by becoming stronger, more independent, and completely immune to their tactics. They had no power over me anymore, and their desperation was making that fact increasingly obvious to everyone who witnessed their behavior. The restraining orders were approved within 2 weeks of the workplace incident. Judge Patricia Morrison, who had presided over the will contest, reviewed the evidence of escalating harassment and granted comprehensive protection orders that prohibited any member of my family from contacting me directly or indirectly. Ms. Thompson, Judge Morrison said during the hearing, the pattern of behavior documented in these reports constitutes systematic harassment and stalking. The fake medical emergency and workplace confrontation demonstrate an escalation that justifies significant legal protection. The restraining orders were more comprehensive than I had expected. They prohibited not just direct contact, but also third-party communication, social media, monitoring workplace visits, and any attempts to contact my friends' coworkers or landlord. Violating the orders would result in immediate arrest and criminal charges. More importantly, the legal proceedings had created an official record of their manipulative and criminal behavior that would follow them permanently. Any future attempts at harassment would be viewed in the context of their established pattern of abuse and fraud. 2 days after the restraining orders were finalized, I received a call from Dr. Patricia Wells, the private investigator who had documented my family's financial abuse from my grandfather's will. Kyle, I wanted to give you an update on something that might interest you, Dr. Wells said. During my investigation of your family's finances, I discovered some discrepancies that I reported to the appropriate authorities. What kind of discrepancies? Your parents have been filing false tax returns for the past 3 years, claiming Jake as a dependent and deducting fake medical expenses that were actually money they stole from you. The IRS is conducting an audit that could result in criminal charges for tax fraud. They were using my stolen money as tax deductions. Apparently so. They claimed Jake's supposed medical treatments and Emma's fabricated car repairs as medical and casualty deductions, even though the money actually went to normal household expenses. It's a sophisticated fraud scheme that they probably thought would never be discovered. The revelation that my family had been committing tax fraud using my stolen money was almost funny in its audacity. They had found a way to exploit me twice, stealing my money, and then using the theft as fake tax deductions. But Dr. Wells had more surprising news. There's something else you should know. During the investigation, I discovered that Jake's drug overdose that started this whole situation wasn't as serious as your family claimed. What do you mean? Medical records show that Jake had consumed a small amount of marijuana and alcohol, not the life-threatening drug overdose your family described. He was treated and released within hours, but your family exaggerated the situation to create maximum drama and emotional manipulation. They lied about that too. It appears they've been lying about everything for years. Jake's supposed medical crises, Emma's car problems, your parents' financial emergencies, even your grandfather's condition when they called you with 53 voicemails. Almost everything they've told you has been either completely false or dramatically exaggerated. The pattern was so comprehensive that it was almost breathtaking. My family had built an entire relationship with me based on fabricated crises and manufactured emergencies, all designed to extract money and emotional support while giving nothing genuine in return. That afternoon, I received a call from Marcus with news that completed the picture of my family's deception. "My Kyle, you're not going to believe this, but I just ran into someone from Phoenix who knows your family," Marcus said. "Jake has been telling everyone that you won the lottery and moved to Tucson to avoid sharing the money with your family. He's claiming I won the lottery. Apparently, it's a whole elaborate story about how you got rich and abandoned your poor family out of greed. He's been using this story to get sympathy and financial support from friends and neighbors. So even now they're lying about why I left and using those lies to manipulate other people. It gets better. Emma has been telling people that you had a nervous breakdown and are living in Arizona under psychiatric care. She's been collecting money for your supposed medical expenses. The fact that my family was continuing to exploit my absence by creating new lies about my situation was almost impressive in its creativity. They had turned my escape from their abuse into a new source of manipulation and fraud. But their lies were becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. People in Phoenix were starting to ask questions about the inconsistencies in their stories, especially after the newspaper coverage of the lawsuit and my television interview about family financial abuse. The most satisfying news came a week later from Sarah, my loyal friend who had remained in Phoenix. "Kyle, you should know that your family's reputation in the neighborhood has completely collapsed," Sarah reported during one of our weekly phone calls. "Everyone knows about the lawsuit, the fake medical records, and the harassment campaign. They're being shunned by people who used to support them." "How are they handling that?" "Not well. Your mother has been going around telling anyone who will listen that you brainwashed your grandfather and stole their inheritance through elder abuse. But most people have seen the court records and know that's not true." "What about Jake's supposed recovery?" "He's been in and out of rehab programs, but he keeps getting kicked out for selling drugs to other patients. Turns out he was never as interested in getting clean as he was in using rehab as an excuse to ask for money." And Emma. Her husband finally left her after discovering she had been lying about why she needed money all the time. He found out about the identity theft and the fake emergencies, and he filed for divorce. "She's been calling me trying to get your phone number so she can ask for financial help with legal fees." The collapse of my family's relationships and reputation felt like natural consequences rather than revenge. They had built their entire social structure on lies and manipulation, so it made sense that everything would fall apart once people learned the truth about their behavior. The most liberating realization came during a therapy session with Dr. Andrea Kim, a psychologist in Tucson who specialized in family trauma and recovery. "Kyle, I want you to understand something important about your situation," Dr. Kim said during one of our sessions. "Your family's continued lying and manipulation after you left proves that their behavior was never about loving you or wanting a relationship with you." "What do you mean?" "People who genuinely love someone and want them back focus on changing their own behavior and making amends for their mistakes. Your family has spent months creating new lies, escalating their harassment, and attacking your credibility. That's not the behavior of people who want to repair a relationship." So their claims about missing me and wanting me back are fake too. Their claims are about control and financial support, not love. Real love involves respect, honesty, and consideration for the other person's well being. What your family has shown you is possessiveness and exploitation disguised as love. Dr. Kim's insight helped me understand that I hadn't lost a loving family. I had escaped from people who had never actually loved me in any healthy or genuine way. Their version of love required me to sacrifice my well being, accept abuse, and provide unlimited financial and emotional support without receiving anything positive in return. 6 months after leaving Phoenix, I was promoted to senior marketing manager with a significant salary increase and expanded responsibilities. Marcus had found a job he loved with a software company in Tucson, and we had moved in together to a beautiful apartment with mountain views. My grandfather's inheritance had been fully transferred to my accounts, providing financial security I had never imagined possible. But more importantly, I had built a life based on genuine relationships, professional achievement, and personal peace. The contrast with my old life was stark. Instead of constant family crises, I had calm evenings with Marcus and friends who valued my company rather than my resources. Instead of emergency phone calls demanding money and support, I had conversations about shared interests, future plans, and mutual goals. For the first time in my adult life, I was living instead of just surviving. 2 years after leaving Phoenix, I stood in the conference room of Thompson Recovery Services, the consulting firm I had built to help other survivors of family financial abuse. The morning, Arizona sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the mission statement painted on the wall, helping survivors reclaim their lives from family exploitation. My business had grown beyond anything I had imagined possible. What started as informal support for people who reached out after reading about my story had evolved into a comprehensive program offering legal advocacy, financial planning, and emotional support for family abuse survivors. "Kyle, the Parker family is here for their consultation," said Jennifer Martinez, my business partner and lead counselor. Jennifer was the nurse who had called me after reading the newspaper article about my family's lawsuit. She had successfully escaped her own exploitative family situation and joined me in helping others do the same. The Parkers were a typical case adult daughter, Sarah, who had been financially supporting her manipulative parents and addicted brother for 15 years while being blamed for every family problem. The pattern was so familiar, it was like looking at a younger version of myself. "Sarah, tell me about the moment you realized something needed to change," I said, settling into the comfortable chair across from her in our consultation room. "Last month, my father called to tell me my mother was dying of cancer and needed expensive treatment," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "I was getting ready to take out a second mortgage on my house to pay for her medical bills when I decided to call the hospital directly to ask about payment plans." "What did you discover?" "My mother had a minor skin cancer that was successfully treated with outpatient surgery covered by insurance. She wasn't dying, didn't need expensive treatment, and all her medical bills had already been paid. They made up the whole crisis to get money from me." "How did you feel when you realized they had lied about something so serious?" "Devastated, but also relieved because it finally proved to me that I wasn't crazy for feeling like something was wrong. They had been manufacturing medical emergencies for years, and I had been believing them because who lies about cancer? Sarah's story was heartbreakingly similar to my own experience with Jake's overdose and my grandfather's fabricated medical crisis. Family financial abusers often used fake medical emergencies because they knew most people wouldn't question or investigate serious health situations. "Sarah, you're gonna go through a process that's difficult, but ultimately liberating," I explained. First, you'll feel guilty for protecting yourself instead of helping your family. Then you'll feel angry about years of lies and manipulation. Finally, you'll feel peace when you realize that their problems were never your responsibility to solve. Our consultation continued for 2 hours, covering legal protections, financial planning, and emotional recovery strategies. By the end of the session, Sarah had a comprehensive plan for protecting herself from her family's exploitation while building an independent life. Cal, how do you handle the guilt? Sarah asked as our session was ending. I know intellectually that I'm making the right decision, but emotionally, I still feel like I'm abandoning people who need me. Sarah, people who genuinely need help don't lie to get it. Your family doesn't need you to enable their irresponsibility and dysfunction. What they need is to face the natural consequences of their choices so they can learn to make better ones. Have you heard from your family since you left? Not directly thanks to the restraining orders, but I've heard through mutual acquaintances that they've been forced to become self-sufficient, and some of them are actually doing better without me enabling their problems. This was true. According to Sarah, my old friend who still lived in Phoenix, Jake had completed a legitimate rehab program after being cut off from all family financial support. Emma had found a full-time job and was learning to manage her own finances. My parents had downsized to an affordable apartment and were living within their means for the first time in years. It turns out that being forced to solve their own problems was exactly what they needed, I told Sarah. As long as I was available to rescue them from consequences, they had no motivation to change their destructive patterns. That afternoon, Marcus and I met with our wedding planner to finalize details for our ceremony next month. We were getting married in a small chapel in the Sonoran Desert, surrounded by friends who had supported our relationship and my recovery from family trauma. Have you decided about inviting your family? Our wedding planner asked gently. It was a question we had been avoiding for months. No, I said firmly. This day is about celebrating our future together, not revisiting painful relationships from my past. What about your grandfather? Marcus asked. He's the one person from your family who truly supported you. I think Grandpa understands why I can't invite some family members without inviting others, I said. He knows that my healing required creating complete separation from toxic relationships. The truth was that my grandfather and I had maintained a relationship despite my estrangement from the rest of the family. He visited Tucson every few months and we talked regularly on the phone. He was proud of my business success and my recovery from years of family abuse. Grandpa told me last week that he's proud of the life I've built, I told Marcus. He said that protecting myself from exploitation was the bravest thing I'd ever done, and that my happiness now proves I made the right choice. That evening, I received a call that brought everything full circle. Detective Maria Santos from Phoenix called with news about my family's legal situation. Pues, Kyle, I wanted to update you on the criminal charges we discussed, Detective Santos said. Your family has been indicted on multiple charges including tax fraud, identity theft, and filing false police reports. What does that mean for them? Your parents are facing potential prison time for the tax fraud scheme. Jake is looking at felony charges for the identity theft, and Emma could be charged as an accessory. They've been offered plea deals that would involve restitution payments and community service if they admit guilt and complete financial fraud education programs. Are they accepting the plea deals? Your parents have agreed to the terms, but Jake is still trying to fight the charges. His lawyer seems to think he can convince a jury that addiction excuses criminal behavior. What about the money they stole from me over the years? Restitution is part of the plea agreements. You should receive compensation for the documented financial theft, plus interest and penalties. It won't recover everything they took, but it's a significant amount. The idea of receiving restitution for years of financial exploitation was satisfying, but not as important as the peace I had found by removing them from my life. Money could be replaced, but the years I had spent being their scapegoat and ATM could never be recovered. 2 weeks before my wedding, I received an unexpected letter forwarded from my old Phoenix address. The return address showed it was from Jake, who was apparently writing from a county jail while awaiting trial. Kyle, the letter began, "I know you probably won't read this, but I wanted you to know that I understand why you left. Being in jail has given me time to think about how badly we treated you, and I realize now that we were never really your family. We were just people who used you." The letter continued for several pages with Jake describing his realization that their family dynamics had been built on exploitation rather than love. He apologized for the identity theft, acknowledged that his addiction didn't excuse his criminal behavior, and expressed genuine remorse for years of manipulation and abuse. "I don't expect forgiveness," Jake wrote near the end of the letter, "and I'm not asking you to contact me or let us back into your life. I just wanted you to know that at least one person in this family finally understands that you were the victim, not the villain. You deserved better from all of us." Reading Jake's letter brought tears to my eyes, but they were tears of closure rather than sadness. His acknowledgement of their abusive behavior validated everything I had experienced and every difficult decision I had made to protect myself. Marcus and I were married on a perfect October morning, surrounded by 25 people who genuinely loved and supported us. Jennifer Martinez served as my maid of honor, Helen Rodriguez walked me down the aisle in place of my father, and my grandfather gave a toast that brought everyone to tears. "Kyle has shown all of us what it means to choose courage over comfort," my grandfather said, raising his glass. "She walked away from people who were supposed to love her because she valued herself enough to demand genuine love instead of exploitation disguised as family obligation. Her strength and wisdom inspire everyone who knows her story." 6 months after our wedding, I received the most meaningful recognition of my recovery journey. The Arizona Coalition Against Domestic Violence honored Thompson Recovery Services with their annual advocacy award for our work helping family financial abuse survivors. Kyle Thompson has transformed her personal experience with family exploitation into a powerful force for helping others escape similar situations. The award presenter announced, "Her courage in speaking publicly about family financial abuse has raised awareness of this hidden form of domestic violence and provided hope for thousands of survivors across the country." Standing on the stage, accepting the award, I thought about how different my life had become from that night in the hospital when my family blamed me for Jake's overdose. The scared, confused woman who had driven home from the emergency room that night had been replaced by someone who understood her own worth and refused to accept less than genuine love and respect. As I looked out at the audience of survivors, advocates, and supporters, I realized that my family had inadvertently given me the greatest gift possible. Their abuse had taught me to recognize genuine love by showing me what it wasn't. Their manipulation had made me strong enough to build a life based on authentic relationships. Their rejection had forced me to discover that I was complete and worthy all by myself. The audience rose in applause as I concluded my acceptance speech. To every person who has been told that family abuse is normal, that exploitation is love, or that leaving toxic people makes you selfish, you deserve better. You deserve relationships based on mutual respect, genuine care, and honest communication. You deserve to be valued for who you are, not just what you can provide. Most importantly, you deserve to understand that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and even for toxic family members is to walk away completely and give everyone a chance to grow. After the ceremony, as Marcus and I drove home through the desert landscape I had come to love, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment of complete peace and genuine happiness. I had learned that family isn't defined by genetics or legal relationships, but by love, respect, and mutual support. Real family doesn't require you to set yourself on fire to keep them warm, True love doesn't demand that you sacrifice your well being to prove your loyalty. Most importantly, I had discovered that leaving toxic people isn't abandonment, it's survival. And sometimes protecting yourself from exploitation is the most loving thing you can do for everyone involved because it forces harmful people to face the consequences of their behavior and choose whether to change or continue destroying relationships. My story began with a family that blamed me for everything wrong in their lives. It ended with me understanding that their problems were never mine to solve, their happiness was never my responsibility to create, and their love was never worth the price they demanded for it. For anyone listening to my story who sees themselves in my experience, I want you to know this. You are not responsible for fixing broken people, funding other people's irresponsibility, or accepting abuse to maintain relationships. You deserve genuine love, authentic respect, and the peace that comes from building a life surrounded by people who value your well-being as much as their own. The greatest lesson I learned was that sometimes walking away from family isn't giving up on love. It's finally learning what love actually looks like. Have you ever felt like the scapegoat in your family, constantly blamed for problems you didn't create? Have you experienced family members who only contact you when they need something but never seem to appreciate the support you provide? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If my story resonated with you, please give this video a like to help others who might be going through similar situations find this content. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about overcoming toxic relationships and building healthier boundaries with family members. Most importantly, please share this video with anyone who might benefit from hearing that they're not alone in dealing with family financial abuse or emotional manipulation. Sometimes knowing that other people have escaped similar situations and built happy lives can provide the hope and courage someone needs to protect themselves. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of a community that supports survivors of family abuse. I hope my journey from being a family scapegoat to building a life of genuine peace and happiness inspires you to prioritize your own well-being and demand the authentic love and respect you deserve. Remember, you are worth more than what you can provide for other people, and real family will never require you to prove that through sacrifice and suffering.